I watched the security footage on my phone for the third time, my hands trembling with rage. There it was, clear evidence of what my manager did to Sarah in the supply closet. HR had just told me my harassment complaint was not a priority right now, dismissing months of documented abuse. I stared at the email confirming they'd look into it eventually. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made a call that would change everything. 4 days later, federal investigators walked through our front doors. My name is Jacquelyn, and I'm 28 years old. 2 years ago, I thought I'd found my dream job as a digital marketing specialist at Morrison & Associates Marketing in downtown Portland, Oregon. The company occupied 3 floors of a beautiful brick building overlooking the Willamette River, and I genuinely loved crafting social media campaigns for our diverse client base. Everything changed 6 months ago when Derek Patterson joined us as the new department manager. He arrived with impressive credentials from a competing firm, boasting about million-dollar campaigns and Fortune 500 connections. During his first team meeting, Derek seemed professional enough, discussing quarterly goals and revenue targets with the confidence of someone who knew the industry inside and out. But within weeks, I started noticing troubling patterns in his behavior. It began with seemingly innocent comments about female employees' appearances. Derek would compliment Sarah's lovely dress while discussing project deadlines, or mention how Monica's new haircut really brought out her eyes during budget reviews. These observations felt unnecessary and made several of us uncomfortable, but they seemed minor compared to what came next. Derek started asking invasive personal questions during one-on-one meetings. He'd inquire about our relationship status, weekend plans, and living situations with a level of interest that felt inappropriate for workplace conversations. When I mentioned living alone in my apartment near Hawthorne, his eyes lingered on me in a way that made my skin crawl. The favoritism became impossible to ignore. Derek consistently assigned the most prestigious projects to our male colleagues while relegating women to administrative tasks and client maintenance work. Tim Rodriguez, a 29-year-old marketing analyst, suddenly became Derek's golden boy, receiving invitations to exclusive client dinners and opportunities to present at industry conferences. Meanwhile, talented women like Sarah and Monica found themselves excluded from important strategy meetings and decision-making processes. Sarah Thompson, a 22-year-old graphic designer fresh out of Portland State University, bore the brunt of Derek's inappropriate attention. She was brilliant at visual storytelling and had already won 2 industry awards for her campaign designs. But instead of recognizing her professional accomplishments, Derek seemed fixated on her youth and inexperience. Monica Chen, our 35-year-old account manager and a single mother of 2 children, tried to maintain professional boundaries while Derek increasingly invaded her personal space during conversations. She'd worked in marketing for over a decade and brought invaluable client relationships to our team, but Derek treated her expertise as less valuable than Tim's enthusiasm. As someone with administrative privileges for social media monitoring, I had access to our building's security camera system. It was part of my job to track our office presence for client billing purposes and ensure our workspace maintained professional standards for potential visitors. That's how I witnessed the incident that changed everything. Last Tuesday evening, around 6:30, most employees had already left for the day. I was finishing up a campaign analysis when I noticed movement on the security monitor from the supply closet area near our break room. The timestamp showed Derek entering the small storage space, followed moments later by Sarah. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Derek cornered Sarah against the shelving unit, his body blocking her exit route. Even without audio, his aggressive posture and her defensive stance told a clear story. She tried to move toward the door, but he positioned himself to prevent her escape. His hands gestured emphatically while she shook her head repeatedly, obvious distress written across her face. When Derek reached out and grabbed Sarah's wrist, pulling her closer despite her resistance, I realized this wasn't a workplace disagreement about project specifications. This was sexual harassment escalating into assault. Sarah finally pushed past him and fled the storage area, leaving Derek alone among the office supplies and printer cartridges. She didn't return to collect her belongings from her desk, and I later learned she'd called in sick the entire rest of that week. I spent sleepless nights replaying that footage, understanding that what I'd witnessed represented far more than a single inappropriate moment. Derek's behavior followed a calculated pattern designed to isolate and intimidate female employees while maintaining plausible deniability. He was systematically targeting women he perceived as vulnerable. Recent graduates like Sarah who feared jeopardizing their early careers, single mothers like Monica who couldn't afford to lose steady employment, and newer employees like me who lacked established networks within the company. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Derek wasn't just a problematic manager making poor decisions. He was a predator who'd found the perfect hunting ground in our supposedly progressive marketing firm. I knew I had to act to protect my colleagues, but I also understood that confronting Derek directly would likely result in retaliation against both Sarah and myself. Our employee handbook outlined clear procedures for reporting workplace harassment, and I naively believed that presenting documented evidence to our human resources department would prompt swift action. Looking back, I wish I'd understood then what I learned later about how corporate priorities really work. The next morning, I began preparing a comprehensive complaint that I hoped would finally hold Derek accountable for his predatory behavior. I spent 3 days meticulously documenting every incident I could recall or verify. I printed screenshots of inappropriate text messages Derek had sent to female employees, compiled witness statements from colleagues who'd experienced uncomfortable interactions, and created a detailed timeline spanning the 6 months since his arrival. Sarah initially hesitated to provide an official statement, terrified that speaking up would destroy her fledgling career. But after I showed her the security footage of Derek's assault in the supply closet, she understood that staying silent would only enable his continued predatory behavior. Monica contributed her own accounts of Derek's boundary violations, including detailed descriptions of unwanted physical contact during allegedly professional conversations. The evidence painted an undeniable picture of systematic harassment targeting women throughout our department. Linda Walsh, our Human Resources Director, scheduled our meeting for the following Thursday morning. Her office occupied a corner suite on the executive floor, decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and company values. Certificates from human resources seminars covered one wall, suggesting someone committed to professional workplace standards. Linda's initial response seemed appropriately serious. She listened attentively as I presented my documentation, occasionally nodding and taking notes on her legal pad. Her questions about specific dates and witness availability suggested genuine concern about the allegations. "These are very serious accusations, Jacquelyn," Linda said, her tone measured and professional. "Sexual harassment has no place in our organization, and we take these matters extremely seriously. Any behavior that makes employees feel unsafe or uncomfortable requires thorough investigation." But something in her body language didn't match her words. She kept glancing at her computer screen during my presentation, and her fingers drummed impatiently on her desk when I detailed Derek's pattern of escalating behavior. Most telling was her reaction when I mentioned Derek's name, a subtle tensing of her jaw that suggested she wasn't entirely surprised by these allegations. "Have there been other complaints about Derek's conduct?" I asked directly, watching her expression carefully. Linda's pause lasted several seconds too long. "We conduct thorough background checks on all management hires," she said finally. "Derek comes to us with excellent references and a proven track record in the industry." Her evasive answer raised immediate red flags. In my experience, innocent questions about prior complaints typically received straightforward denials or affirmations. Linda's diplomatic non-response suggested she was hiding something significant. "But have other employees raised similar concerns about his behavior?" I pressed, unwilling to accept her deflection. Linda's composure cracked slightly. "There may have been some minor personality conflicts during his transition period," she admitted. "It's not unusual for management changes to create adjustment challenges as teams adapt to new leadership styles." Her euphemistic language couldn't disguise the truth. Other women had already reported Derek's harassment, and human resources had categorized serious misconduct as personality conflicts and adjustment challenges. "What happened to those previous complaints?" I asked, my voice harder now. Linda shifted uncomfortably in her executive chair. "We conducted appropriate due diligence during Derek's hiring process," she said. "His previous employer provided positive references regarding his professional conduct and technical capabilities." But her careful phrasing revealed another troubling truth. Previous employer was singular, not plural. Combined with her mention of transition period conflicts, This suggested Derek had been forced to leave his last position under questionable circumstances. Did his previous company specifically address any harassment allegations in their reference? I demanded. Linda's professionalism finally cracked completely. Look, Jacquelyn, Derek brought in over $2 million in new business during his first quarter here. Our company has been struggling with client retention over the past 18 months, and we can't afford to lose momentum over workplace personality conflicts. There it was, the ugly truth about corporate priorities. Our conversation revealed that Derek hadn't simply been hired despite his problematic history. He'd been specifically recruited because of his sales record, with full knowledge that his personality conflicts included sexual harassment of female colleagues. Morrison and Associates had calculated that his revenue generation outweighed the legal and ethical risks of employing a known predator. Linda's promise of a thorough investigation came with no timeline, no follow-up meetings, and no interim protections for potential victims. When I asked about immediate steps to ensure Sarah's safety, Linda suggested that maintaining professional boundaries was the responsibility of all employees, effectively placing the burden on victims to avoid their harasser. I left that meeting feeling betrayed by the very system designed to protect employees from workplace abuse. But I still held on to hope that Linda would eventually do the right thing, that corporate leadership would prioritize employee safety over quarterly revenue targets. That naive optimism disappeared completely over the following weeks. Derek's behavior toward me changed dramatically after my HR meeting. He began excluding me from client meetings where my input would normally be essential, questioning my project decisions in front of other team members, and subtly undermining my relationships with longtime colleagues. His retaliation was professional and calculated, designed to damage my career while maintaining plausible deniability. During our next team meeting, Derek announced that Tim would be taking over the Johnson Industries campaign I'd been developing for 3 months. We need fresh perspectives on this project, Derek explained, avoiding eye contact with me while Tim smirked at his sudden promotion. The message was clear. Speaking up against Derek's harassment would result in professional consequences for anyone brave enough to challenge his authority. 2 weeks after my HR complaint, absolutely nothing had changed except that Derek now knew he could harass women with complete impunity. The company retreat at Mount Hood's Timberline Lodge should have been an opportunity for team building and strategic planning. Instead, it became the setting for Derek's most brazen assault yet. Derek had volunteered to coordinate hotel room assignments, claiming he wanted to ensure optimal team dynamics during our 3-day planning session. What he actually engineered was an opportunity to position himself near female colleagues while separating us from potential allies who might intervene. He assigned himself the room directly adjacent to Monica's, with Sarah just across the hall. Tim and other male colleagues received accommodations on completely different floors, effectively isolating the women from anyone who might witness inappropriate behavior. The first day's sessions proceeded normally enough, with presentations about quarterly goals and client acquisition strategies. But Derek's predatory behavior intensified during evening social activities, when professional boundaries typically relaxed and alcohol flowed more freely. During the welcome reception, Derek monopolized Monica's attention, standing uncomfortably close while she tried to discuss the Patterson Industries account. When she attempted to join conversations with other colleagues, he consistently maneuvered to maintain physical proximity, his hand frequently touching her shoulder or lower back under the guise of casual interaction. Saturday night, after a dinner presentation about emerging digital marketing trends, Derek offered to walk Monica to her room. She politely declined, mentioning fatigue from the day's activities and her need to call home to check on her children. What happened next would haunt Monica for months afterward. Around 11:30 that evening, Monica heard aggressive knocking on her hotel room door. Assuming a colleague needed urgent assistance with a work emergency, she opened the door without checking the peephole. Derek pushed past her into the room, clearly intoxicated and aggressively demanding her attention. The smell of whiskey overwhelmed the small space as he cornered her near the bathroom door, blocking her access to the main exit. "We need to talk about your attitude lately," he slurred, his usual professional facade completely abandoned. "You've been cold and distant during team meetings, and it's affecting department morale." Monica tried to maintain calm professionalism despite her growing terror. "Derek, this isn't appropriate. We can discuss any work concerns during business hours tomorrow." But Derek had moved beyond workplace conversation. His hands reached for her, grabbing her wrists when she tried to maintain distance. "You're going to listen to what I have to say," he demanded, his grip tightening painfully. Monica's mother had enrolled her in self-defense classes during college, and those long-forgotten skills suddenly returned. She drove her knee upward while simultaneously breaking his grip on her wrists, creating enough space to reach the door handle. Derek stumbled backward, shocked by her resistance but not deterred. "You can't just walk away from me," he shouted as Monica fled into the hallway. "I'm your manager, and you'll treat me with respect." Monica spent the remainder of that night in the hotel lobby, too terrified to return to her room and too ashamed to call hotel security. She felt responsible somehow, wondering if her friendly demeanor during team meetings had inadvertently encouraged Derek's misconduct. The next morning, she confided in me during breakfast, her voice shaking as she recounted Derek's assault. The professional confidence she'd cultivated over a decade in marketing had crumbled overnight, replaced by fear and self-doubt. "I can't report this," she whispered, glancing around the restaurant to ensure we wouldn't be overheard. "I need this job, Jacquelyn. My kids depend on my income. And who's going to believe that Derek Patterson, star manager with the $1 million sales record, tried to force himself on a single mother in a hotel room?" But I convinced her that staying silent would only enable Derek to escalate his behavior with future victims. Together, we decided to present Linda Walsh with evidence of criminal assault, confident that even the most profit-focused human resources director would be forced to take action. We were devastatingly wrong. Linda's reaction to Monica's assault allegation revealed the true depth of our company's moral bankruptcy. Instead of expressing concern for Monica's safety or promising immediate investigation, Linda immediately began questioning the victim's credibility and behavior. "These are very serious accusations," Linda began, her tone suggesting skepticism rather than concern. "Sexual assault allegations can destroy careers and reputations, so we need to be absolutely certain about the facts before proceeding." Her questions focused relentlessly on Monica's conduct, rather than Derek's criminal behavior. Had Monica been drinking during the reception? What was she wearing when Derek arrived at her room? Had her previous interactions with Derek been overly friendly in ways that might have been misinterpreted? The victim-blaming reached its disgusting climax when Linda suggested Monica bore partial responsibility for Derek's assault. "Monica, you're an experienced professional who understands how to maintain appropriate workplace boundaries," Linda said. "Some of your colleagues have mentioned that you seem quite comfortable with casual physical interaction during team meetings. Is it possible that Derek misinterpreted your friendly demeanor as romantic interest?" Monica's devastation was heartbreaking to witness. This accomplished account manager, who'd successfully managed multi-million-dollar client relationships and raised 2 children as a single parent, was being told that her professionalism and warmth had somehow invited criminal assault. But Linda wasn't finished destroying Monica's confidence. "Making false accusations against a department manager is a serious matter that could result in termination for defamation," Linda continued. "Our company has invested significant resources in Derek's success here, and we can't allow personal grievances to undermine his effectiveness." The threat was crystal clear. Report Derek's criminal behavior and lose your job. Monica left that meeting in tears, convinced that speaking up had been a terrible mistake that would cost her the financial security her children needed. She spent the following days apologizing to me for overreacting to Derek's behavior and begging me not to pursue the matter further. But I was beginning to understand that our company's protection of Derek went far deeper than simple favoritism toward a successful manager. Linda's immediate resort to victim blaming and intimidation suggested a coordinated strategy to silence harassment complaints. During my lunch break that day, I decided to investigate Derek's background more thoroughly. Our company's internal directory included basic biographical information about management personnel, and Derek's profile mentioned his previous position at Sterling Communications in Seattle. A simple internet search revealed that Sterling Communications had quietly settled a sexual harassment lawsuit filed by 3 female employees approximately 8 months ago. The settlement amount wasn't disclosed, but the timing coincided exactly with Derek's arrival at Morrison and Associates. Derek hadn't simply changed jobs for career advancement. He'd been forced to leave his previous position due to sexual misconduct, and our company had hired him with full knowledge of his predatory history. Even worse, I discovered that Sterling Communications was owned by the same parent company as Morrison and Associates. Derek's hiring was actually an internal transfer designed to avoid negative publicity while preserving the sales talent that had generated millions in revenue despite his criminal behavior. Our human resources department wasn't failing to address Derek's misconduct. They were actively covering it up as part of a corporate strategy that valued profit over employee safety. That afternoon, I began documenting every aspect of this cover-up, understanding that traditional internal reporting mechanisms were completely corrupted. If we wanted justice for Monica and protection for future victims, we would need to go outside our company's control. Working late on Thursday evening, 3 weeks later, I made a discovery that revealed the true scope of Derek's criminal activity. While updating our social media monitoring software, I noticed unusual data usage patterns on our office network that warranted investigation. As part of my digital marketing responsibilities, I maintained administrative access to various technology systems, including network security protocols designed to prevent data breaches and unauthorized equipment usage. The anomalous bandwidth consumption seemed to originate from Derek's office computer, suggesting he was uploading or downloading large file quantities during non-standard hours. My technical investigation led me to the women's restroom on our floor, where I discovered a small wireless camera concealed behind the air freshener dispenser. The device was professionally installed and nearly invisible unless someone knew exactly what to look for. Further examination revealed that this camera had been recording continuously for months, capturing intimate footage of female employees who used the facilities during work hours. The wireless signal traced directly back to Derek's computer, where I found an external drive containing hundreds of hours of illegal surveillance footage. The breadth of Derek's criminal operation was staggering. He'd recorded every woman in our department, plus female employees from other floors who occasionally used our restroom during meetings or breaks. The files were organized by date and included thumbnail previews that made their invasive nature unmistakably clear. I created multiple backup copies of this evidence before confronting human resources, understanding that such explicit proof of criminal behavior would force even Linda Walsh to take action. No corporate executive would risk federal criminal charges to protect an employee engaged in obvious illegal surveillance. Once again, I completely underestimated our company's commitment to protecting Derek. Linda's reaction to my criminal evidence was swift and devastating. Instead of expressing shock at Derek's illegal surveillance operation, she confiscated my backup drives and demanded I sign a non-disclosure agreement about my unauthorized access to company computer systems. "Jacquelyn, what you've done here constitutes a serious breach of workplace privacy and computer security protocols," Linda announced, as if I were the criminal in this situation. "Accessing another employee's computer files without permission violates both company policy and federal law." The audacity of her response left me speechless. Derek had been secretly recording women in various states of undress for months, and Linda was threatening me with prosecution for discovering his crimes. But the worst revelation was still coming. "Derek has accepted a promotion to regional manager," Linda continued, her voice radiating smug satisfaction. "His outstanding sales performance and leadership capabilities have earned him a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities across our Pacific Northwest operations." Derek wasn't being punished for criminal surveillance. He was being rewarded with career advancement and geographic expansion that would give him access to female employees at offices throughout Washington and Oregon. Linda's explanation for this insane decision revealed the true power structure protecting Derek's criminal behavior. "CEO Morrison has known Derek's family for over 20 years, she said. "Derek is Richard's godson, and they maintain a close personal relationship that extends far beyond professional considerations. Any attempt to damage Derek's career or reputation would be viewed as a personal attack against Mr. Morrison's judgment and character." The corporate corruption was complete. Our chief executive officer was Derek's godfather, which explained why no amount of evidence would result in accountability. Family loyalty trumped employee safety, federal law, and basic human decency. Linda's final threat demonstrated how thoroughly our company was prepared to destroy anyone who challenged Derek's immunity. "We've prepared a comprehensive legal response to any allegations you might consider making outside this company," she said, sliding a document across her desk. "Our attorneys are prepared to argue that any criminal evidence was fabricated or planted by a disgruntled employee seeking revenge against successful management." The document outlined a character assassination strategy that would portray me as a mentally unstable woman whose professional failures had driven her to frame an innocent manager. They'd researched my personal life, identified potential vulnerabilities, and developed talking points designed to destroy my credibility with law enforcement, media outlets, or potential employers. Your best option is to accept our generous severance package and find opportunities elsewhere, Linda concluded. We're prepared to provide neutral references for your job search, assuming you maintain appropriate discretion about internal workplace matters. They were literally paying me to disappear quietly while Derek continued his criminal activities with complete impunity. Derek's celebration of his promotion was disgusting to witness. He openly bragged about his new salary and expanded authority while making veiled threats about employees who didn't understand their place in the corporate hierarchy. The psychological impact on his victims was devastating. Sarah had already quit without notice, unable to continue working in an environment where her assaulter was promoted rather than prosecuted. Monica's panic attacks had worsened to the point where she required medical leave, jeopardizing her financial security and professional reputation. Other female employees began leaving Morrison and Associates in increasing numbers, citing family obligations or career opportunities, rather than acknowledging the toxic workplace culture that had driven them away. Our department's expertise and institutional knowledge was hemorrhaging, but leadership only cared about maintaining Derek's sales performance. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city lights, finally understanding that our internal systems weren't broken. They were working exactly as designed. Companies like Morrison and Associates prioritized profit and personal relationships over employee safety, confident that victims would remain silent rather than face legal and financial retaliation. But I'd reached my limit of accepting injustice as normal. I began researching external options for challenging Derek's criminal behavior and our company's systematic cover-up. Federal agencies, law enforcement, regulatory bodies, media outlets, somewhere in this country's legal system. There had to be people who cared more about protecting victims than preserving corporate profits. My investigation into external reporting mechanisms would soon reveal that Derek's criminal pattern extended far beyond our small Portland marketing firm. My research into federal reporting options began with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's website, where I found detailed information about filing harassment complaints against employers who failed to address workplace misconduct. The EEOC's Portland field office handled cases throughout Oregon and Washington, with experienced investigators trained to recognize patterns of systematic abuse. I spent hours organizing my evidence chronologically, creating detailed victim statements from Sarah and Monica, and building a comprehensive case file that documented both Derek's criminal behavior and our company's active cover-up. The surveillance footage, harassment reports, and corporate retaliation formed an undeniable pattern of civil rights violations. Tuesday morning, I called the EEOC's main number and asked to speak with an investigator about filing a formal complaint. The receptionist transferred me to Agent Catherine Torres, a senior investigator with 15 years of experience handling complex harassment cases. Agent Torres's immediate response to Derek's name sent chills down my spine. "Derek Patterson, from Morrison and Associates Marketing?" she asked, her voice sharpening with professional interest. "We've been expecting someone to call about him." The federal government had been investigating Derek for months. Agent Torres explained that Derek was the subject of a multi-state investigation involving systematic harassment and illegal surveillance across 4 different companies over the past 5 years. Her task force had been tracking his criminal pattern as he moved between marketing firms throughout the Pacific Northwest. "Your company represents his most ambitious target yet," Agent Torres said. Derek's previous operations focused on smaller firms with limited resources to fight back. Morrison and Associates has the size and client connections that make his criminal enterprise particularly lucrative. The scope of Derek's predatory network was staggering. 17 women across 4 companies had reported similar experiences: workplace harassment escalating to assault, illegal surveillance operations, and corporate cover-ups designed to protect profitable employees. Most settlements had included non-disclosure agreements that prevented victims from warning others about Derek's behavior. But Agent Torres revealed that Derek's criminal activities had recently escalated beyond simple workplace harassment. "We have evidence that Derek has been selling intimate surveillance footage to overseas buyers," she said. This isn't just about workplace misconduct anymore. We're investigating federal trafficking charges that carry decades in prison. Derek's hidden camera operation at Morrison & Associates was part of an international criminal network that monetized illegal recordings of American women. The profits from these sales had funded his lavish lifestyle while providing financial incentives for companies to overlook his criminal behavior. Agent Torres's team had been monitoring Derek's communications for weeks, intercepting phone calls and emails that revealed the full extent of his criminal enterprise. They'd documented conversations with previous employers who'd received payments to provide positive references despite knowing about his predatory history. "Your evidence provides crucial links we've been missing," Agent Torres continued. "The surveillance footage and corporate communications you've documented fill important gaps in our federal case." Federal prosecutors were preparing charges under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, treating Derek's criminal network as an organized crime syndicate. Morrison & Associates' systematic cover-up qualified as conspiracy charges that would target corporate leadership alongside Derek himself. The timeline for federal action was accelerated by my cooperation. Agent Torres explained that federal task force members would execute search warrants within 72 hours before Derek could destroy evidence or flee the jurisdiction. My role as a federal witness would require wearing recording devices during my final interactions with Derek and corporate leadership, capturing additional evidence of their criminal conspiracy. Agent Torres assured me that federal witness protection services were available if needed, including relocation assistance and financial support during the prosecution phase. The conversation revealed that someone inside Morrison & Associates had already been cooperating with federal investigators, providing insider information about Derek's activities and corporate decision-making processes. Agent Torres couldn't identify her source, but suggested that other employees shared my concerns about Derek's criminal behavior. As I prepared to become a key witness in a major federal investigation, I finally understood that my decision to speak up would have consequences far beyond our small Portland marketing firm. Derek's prosecution would prevent countless future victims from experiencing the harassment, assault, and surveillance that had terrorized my colleagues. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful that justice might actually be possible. Tuesday morning arrived, gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that seemed to mirror the tension building throughout our office. I'd spent a sleepless night wearing the recording device Agent Torres had provided, knowing that federal agents were positioning themselves around our building in preparation for simultaneous raids. At exactly 9:15, the front desk receptionist's voice echoed through our office intercom system. "Federal agents are in the building requesting access to all floors. Please remain at your workstations." The next few hours unfolded like scenes from a crime drama, except the criminals were people I'd worked alongside for 2 years. FBI agents, EEOC investigators, ICE cybercrime specialists, and Portland police officers flooded our workplace with search warrants, evidence collection equipment, and arrest documentation. Media crews gathered outside our building as news of the federal raid spread throughout downtown Portland. Agent Torres personally supervised the search of Derek's office, where investigators discovered the external drives containing months of illegal surveillance footage. But the evidence they uncovered revealed criminal activities far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Derek's computer contained financial records showing payments from overseas accounts totaling over $400,000 in the past year alone. International buyers were purchasing intimate recordings of American women for significant sums, creating a profitable market for workplace surveillance footage. The industrial scale of Derek's operation was breathtaking. Federal investigators found evidence of similar surveillance systems installed at his 3 previous companies, generating thousands of hours of illegal recordings spanning 5 years of criminal activity. But the most shocking discovery was CEO Morrison's direct involvement in the trafficking enterprise. Richard Morrison's office safe contained cash deposits, wire transfer confirmations, and encrypted communications with foreign buyers interested in purchasing exclusive American content. Our chief executive officer hadn't simply been protecting his godson from harassment allegations, he'd been actively participating in international trafficking operations that monetized the sexual exploitation of his own employees. Federal agents arrested Derek in the company parking lot as he attempted to flee in his BMW sedan. The scene played out in front of gathered media cameras, with Derek shouting about wrongful persecution and fabricated evidence while federal marshals applied handcuffs. CEO Morrison's arrest occurred at his exclusive country club, where he was playing golf with potential investors when federal agents arrived with arrest warrants. The humiliation of being handcuffed in front of Portland's business elite provided some measure of satisfaction for the victims he'd systematically betrayed. The federal charges were extensive and devastating. Derek faced 23 federal counts including sexual assault, invasion of privacy, conspiracy to commit trafficking, money laundering, and violation of civil rights. Morrison was charged with RICO violations, conspiracy to commit trafficking, money laundering, and tax evasion related to his unreported criminal income. Company assets were frozen pending investigation, including all bank accounts, computer equipment, and client contracts potentially connected to the criminal enterprise. Morrison and Associates Marketing effectively ceased operations as federal investigators documented the full scope of the conspiracy. The media coverage transformed our local harassment complaint into a national story about corporate complicity in international trafficking. News outlets across the country reported on the federal raid, focusing on how a respected marketing firm had become a front for criminal exploitation of female employees. Sarah, Monica, and other victims finally felt safe enough to speak publicly about their experiences. The courage they'd shown in providing evidence had prevented Derek from victimizing women at offices throughout the Pacific Northwest while exposing a criminal network that extended far beyond workplace harassment. Federal investigators interviewed dozens of current and former employees, documenting a systematic pattern of abuse that had been ignored, covered up, and monetized by corporate leadership. The evidence revealed that Morrison and Associates had specifically recruited Derek because his criminal activities generated both direct revenue and blackmail material useful for controlling client relationships. Public support for the victims was overwhelming. Other companies began reviewing their own harassment policies, understanding that federal investigations could expose similar criminal conspiracies throughout corporate America. Employee advocacy groups used our case as evidence for stronger federal oversight of workplace safety. Derek's criminal network had finally been exposed, but the psychological damage to his victims would require years of healing and recovery. The federal trials would begin in 4 months, with Derek and Morrison facing decades in prison for their roles in an international trafficking operation that had exploited American women for profit. Justice was finally being served, but the real victory was preventing Derek from continuing his predatory behavior at companies throughout the region. 3 months after the federal raid, Derek Patterson stood before Judge Sarah Martinez in the Portland Federal Courthouse and pleaded guilty to 18 of 23 charges against him. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of life imprisonment if convicted at trial, Derek accepted a plea agreement that would sentence him to 8 years in federal prison followed by lifetime registration as a sex offender. Richard Morrison chose to fight the charges, confident that his expensive legal team could convince a jury that he was an innocent victim of Derek's deception. The trial lasted 6 weeks and featured devastating testimony from dozens of victims, federal agents, and computer forensics experts who traced financial payments directly to Morrison's personal accounts. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before convicting him on all counts. He received 12 years in federal prison and forfeiture of all assets connected to the criminal enterprise. The therapeutic impact of seeing our abusers held accountable cannot be overstated. Sarah returned to Portland for Derek's sentencing hearing, where she delivered a victim impact statement that reduced hardened federal marshals to tears. Monica's panic attacks diminished significantly after Morrison's conviction, and she began sleeping through the night for the first time in months. Federal victim services provided counseling, financial assistance, and legal advocacy that helped all of Derek's victims rebuild their professional lives. The settlement with Morrison and Associates' parent company included substantial monetary compensation, but more importantly, it funded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting workplace harassment survivors. 6 weeks after the trials concluded, I received an unexpected phone call from Morrison and Associates' parent company, offering me Derek's former position as department head. The salary increase was substantial, and the opportunity to rebuild our workplace culture from the ground up seemed like poetic justice. But accepting that offer would have meant working for the same corporate structure that had enabled Derek's crimes for profit. Instead, I decided to start my own marketing consultancy focused on ethical business practices and workplace safety. Sarah and Monica joined as founding partners, along with 3 other former colleagues who shared our commitment to creating a professional environment where talent mattered more than gender. Our client base grew rapidly as companies throughout the Pacific Northwest sought expertise in implementing genuine harassment prevention policies rather than legal compliance theater. We specialized in helping organizations identify and eliminate the cultural factors that enable predatory behavior while building authentic accountability systems. The business success exceeded my wildest expectations. Within 6 months, we'd recruited 15 employees and secured contracts with major corporations seeking to demonstrate their commitment to workplace equality. Our reputation for integrity and competence attracted clients who valued ethical business practices over short-term profit maximization. Personal growth accompanied professional success in ways I never anticipated. The experience of challenging institutional injustice had revealed inner strength I didn't know I possessed. Standing up to Derek's criminal behavior and our company's cover-up taught me that speaking truth to power requires courage, but creates lasting positive change that extends far beyond individual circumstances. My relationship with my family deepened significantly during this challenging period. My parents, who'd initially worried about my decision to confront workplace harassment, became fierce advocates for my courage. My sister, who worked in human resources for a tech company, completely revamped her employer's reporting procedures based on lessons learned from our federal case. Professional recognition followed naturally from meaningful work. I became a sought-after speaker at business conferences about corporate accountability and workplace safety, sharing our story with executives who were beginning to understand the financial and legal risks of tolerating predatory behavior. Harvard Business School invited me to present a case study about ethical leadership during crisis situations. My ongoing advocacy work with federal agencies helped identify other problematic companies engaged in similar cover-ups. The precedent set by Derek's prosecution enabled investigators to pursue cases that might previously have been dismissed as unprovable. Our experience became a template for recognizing and prosecuting corporate complicity in workplace crimes. All the women involved in Derek's prosecution successfully rebuilt their careers, strengthened by having faced adversity together, and emerged victorious. Sarah launched her own graphic design studio and won several prestigious industry awards within a year. Monica became a consultant helping other single mothers navigate workplace challenges and legal rights. The systemic changes resulting from our case extended far beyond our individual experiences. Federal regulations were strengthened based on evidence from Derek's prosecution, creating new legal protections for employees reporting workplace crimes. Corporate liability standards were clarified, making executives personally responsible for knowingly enabling predatory behavior. Looking back on this journey, I realized that prioritizing integrity over security led to greater professional success than I could have achieved within a corrupted system. My consultancy generates more income than my previous corporate salary, while providing work that feels meaningful and impactful rather than simply profitable. The life lesson that emerged from this experience is profound. Sometimes the most important victories come from refusing to accept injustice as normal. When institutions fail to protect vulnerable people, individual courage can create changes that benefit countless others facing similar challenges. Derek's prosecution prevented him from victimizing women at companies throughout the region for decades to come. Morrison's conviction sent a clear message to other executives that corporate profits cannot justify enabling criminal behavior. The federal precedent established stronger legal protections for workplace harassment survivors nationwide. Most importantly, our decision to speak truth to power demonstrated that ordinary people can challenge institutional corruption and create lasting positive change when they refuse to remain silent about systematic abuse. The courage to act when action seems impossible often leads to outcomes more meaningful than anything we initially imagined possible. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where doing the right thing required risking everything you'd worked to build? I'd love to hear your thoughts about finding courage during impossible circumstances and how speaking up for others can transform not just their lives, but your own as well. Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help other people facing similar challenges find the courage to speak up for what's right. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding strength during difficult times and creating positive change in your workplace and community. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that their voice matters, and that standing up for others can create the kind of change that makes our workplaces and communities safer for everyone. Thank you for listening. And remember that your courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult, can create ripple effects of positive change that extend far beyond what you can see in the moment.